The height is such a hype. You know, I always been thinking about this myself. This why is height so important to so many people, and not least women, when it comes to how they look at men. And yeah, their criteria as to what makes a man attractive. So, you know, myself being not a particularly, I mean, in today's standards anyway, I'm not a particularly tall guy, and I live in a country where there are quite a lot of really tall people, so that has always been a kind of, you know, well, not a burden. I wouldn't say a burden for me, but somewhat, it kind of bothered me, when I was younger anyway, that I wasn't taller and stuff like that. But anyway, I for a long time as a kid, as a teenager, I was really short. So in the end, I have to be grateful that I did grow to a normal height anyway. And yeah, I mean, when I first came over here, I was really tiny. Yeah, but that was of course related to my gland disease, hormonal gland disease that I got, or illness. And then when I grew to I started getting medication and stuff, and I started growing, and I grew to about 5'10" till by the time I was 18, and but still, it kind of makes you angry, I've now grown to a good height, but still, there are so many people here who are, way taller than me. I'm like, why, you bastards, why do you have to be so goddamn tall? I mean, really, I mean, being 6'5" here is normal, simple as that. And now, right now, I mean, I later grew a couple inches more, so I'm like 6 feet, and yeah. But now also this kind of new generation, they just fucking grow and grow. When I see some kids like almost 14 years old, and these boys are already taller than me, some of them. I'm like, holy crap. Yeah, and it must be really intimidating for somebody who is like really short to live in a tall country anyway. Yeah, it kind of sucks, to be honest. Like, but there are always, I mean, you are walking around like this, like looking up at people all the time. But there are certain advantages, of course. When on like crowded, bus or train stops, whatever these stations, you can just slip through everybody. You are faster, you are more nimble if you are, smaller, and the bigger you are, the slower you are, of course, usually. And you see all these really tall men stand like really stiff, they are not going anywhere. They are not, cutting in line. No way, they can't, because it would be too obvious that you know everybody can see them. So they stand out, of course. Yeah, but height is just, I think, I don't know really. I mean, I didn't really believe that height played such a difference when it come. I mean, to women, because way back, like I remember way back, like 20 years ago or even more, I talked to this girl on a chat. One of the first chats that I was on, And she told me that she didn't really care about the height, how tall a guy was. It. He just had to be good looking and charming, kind of intelligent. And I thought that sounded really positive because, I mean, let's face it, there are many guys who aren't that tall but are, have good looks and charm and good humor and even, brains to go with it. But so it's good for them. So why should they suffer just because they are not tall? Why should they have a hard time finding, like you know, a woman or a girl that is, you hot enough and all that? Why should they have to settle for somebody who is like, you know, not so good looking or whatever? Of course, looks, when you say, looks don't matter. Let me be perfectly honest now. All right, I think for people who are not good looking themselves, yeah, looks don't matter. Of course, that's simple as that. If you are not a good looking man, you cannot, of course, you cannot make a big deal out of that. Out of looks, you cannot demand that your woman has to look good, because you are not good looking yourself. So it's logical, right? So, but for men who are good looking, but they are not that tall, that's what I'm saying. It's not really fair that they should suffer to be, just shoved aside in favor for the men who are only, their only advantage over them is that they are taller. That's all. I think that's pretty ridiculous, Yeah, definitely. I mean, why is, for instance, let's say, why is Chris Hemsworth better than Robert Downey Jr. or I mean, why is he? Who says he's more? You know, he's better looking or more charming? I don't think so. I mean, I personally don't think so. But because he's 6'3" and Robert Downey Jr. is 5'9", something like that. I mean, unfortunately, many women, especially younger like girls, they think like, oh, I would rather have this big guy who's 6'3" than a 5'9" guy. So yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But unfortunately, shallowness is really a big problem. I already talked about this. Narcissism is a part of it, and a shallow, you know, shallow perspective on things also is a very common, unfortunately, today. So very often women care more about the size of the man and the size of the man's, rather than, if a man is a, you know, charming guy, kind guy, good looking guy. Even looks now kind of, men aren't perhaps supposed to be so, you know, pretty anymore or handsome. It is now more about being, this big macho guy, with a big part, Yeah, I mean, you know. So, but I would never I would never touch women like that. Of course, I would never even have a chance with them. Of course, I'm just a regular size guy, and in all ways. And but yeah, of course, luckily, I think there are still women who appreciate other qualities. It's just that they are a little harder to find maybe these days. Anyway, returning to my original subject, height. Why is height so important today? Why is height? I mean, it's not just today, it was always kind of important. But I think it started like when people generally started growing taller because like way back 200 years ago, everybody was kind of short, shorter. There were just a few, very few guys, I mean, people who could be called really tall, back then. So back then, of course, it didn't play a big part because almost everybody was short. Like 90% of people were like, 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", stuff like that. Yeah, but now in the last 30 years, let's say something like that, especially last 30 years, I mean, this generation is really, I mean, people really started growing tall, even taller than in the 70s and the 80s. So that's why, I mean, you have so many tall people now. So being short, when you are born, if you are born short, you really kind of stand out, in Europe anyway, in this world. Not so much maybe in China or Korea, well, North Korea, yeah. But in this world, definitely, you do stand out, and not in a good way. Yeah, so still, of course, there is always a portion of short people who are being born and raised. But as I said, there are more tall people now than ever before. So yeah, I mean, it's alright if you are kind of, my height, that stuff. But if you are below like 5'10", 5'9", then you really becomes a problem for you. You become really short. You are really considered short. I think today, if you are like below 5'11" or something, 5'10", I don't know. So before it wasn't like that. And like I know, remember in the early 90s or 80s, like my height, like 6 feet, was really like wow, you were tall, back then. But now, no, not really, not really. You're just average. So yeah, yeah, and those big guys, I mean, how I always wonder how it is to live when you are like 7 feet tall, man. Can't even imagine that you're walking around like, oh, hello, puny people. Like Hulk, I can crush you with your skull with my hand. Stuff like that. I can crush you under my feet. Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, yes. I mean, some people are very big, not just tall, but big. It kind of goes to their head and they start to abuse that, and bully others. And, it's because, why are you going to do it? You are smaller than him. What are you going to do? That's how they think. You can't do anything. Even though maybe you can, of course, if you know how to, if you are a martial artist or something, it doesn't matter how big you are back then, well, yeah, if you are of normal size, I mean. But I just, in the end, I want to say this is silly. I mean, for instance, I mean, many of the greatest people in history were kind of not tall anyway. So many were also short or just average, and yeah, I mean, you gotta struggle to find really many really tall people who were great, historical persons. I think, I mean, there are a few, but yeah, I guess William Wallace was said to be 6'7", but he was like, he was a warrior, you know. He wasn't like a poet or a scientist. Tesla was kind of tall, 6'2", I believe he said he was. Yeah. So yeah, but still, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to get so hung up, on height. I mean, but yeah, of course, it is very. It feels kind of emasculating. I mean, you cannot help sometimes when you meet somebody who's very much taller than you. You cannot help but feel kind of a little inferior almost. I mean, yeah, you don't feel good. I remember once I was at this store and it was a furniture store, and this guy was fucking tall who worked there. Must have been like 6'6" or 7 something. And I was like, oh, look at me. Now I feel real small, real short. And that just didn't feel well. Feel good, but it shouldn't matter, but it matters to us. Unfortunately, it does. But in the end, you gotta remember there are other things than just being tall. Also, when it comes to being manly, such as strength, physical strength, courage, and in the end, also fighting prowess. When we are talking about manly, quality or attributes, anyway, really macho. So height is kind of something that you are born with. You can't do anything about it. Just same with looks. It's your inner qualities that really make you, special or not. If you don't have much inner qualities or good inner qualities, then of course you are not special. But yeah, it is your, what's inside that counts, not how long your body is or how big it is or even how you look if you are very like photogenic or not. Yeah, so just remember that, kids. Everybody. Yeah, I mean, we are all warriors in a way. Life is a battle, is a constant battle. So it's not about who the biggest or strongest guy is in the end, but who is the most, you know, the guy with most endurance. Those guys win the battle. All right, take care.